Now, I think most people wouldn't disagree with you. Well, let me rephrase that in a positive way. They would agree with you that that is at least part of the gospel. But when they talk about it, they tend to talk about things like original sin and the atonement and reconciliation with God and maybe something about heaven and hell. Now, you didn't really say much about any of those things. How does that relate to what you have said, which is about what you said relates mostly to about questions of injustice on earth and caring for the oppressed and things like that. How does that relate to, let's say, the notions of sin and the atonement?
Right. So, okay. Firstly,
in other words,
about the word atonement, its etymology is
rather
literally
distinct from each other. Or
yeah.
How do we understand
that happens? Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, first thing, fun thing, the word atonement literally its etymology is at one mit. They just got smushed together. There's no special magic Greek. It's just at one mit, which I always find funny. The other thing you said is I'm a big believer in original sin. Everything in the world is touched by brokenness in some way or another. So people may notice my name. I don't know. Do people see my name on this thing? Yeah. So it says Bunurong land. So they're the traditional owners.
That's not actually your name, just to clarify.
No, my name is not Matt Bunurong land.
Well, some people might not be familiar with that practice of naming the land.
So we'll explain. So in Australia, it's become a practice because of the historic connection between the First Nations, Indigenous people of this country with the land to acknowledge and name and locate ourselves in relationship to the people who were connected to this land since before, white settlement, colonization, and so on. And so when a baby is born in Australia, they open their eyes on land that has been shaped by and that is in a society that was built by dispossessing First Peoples of their land. There are things about that were done in ignorance. There are things about that were done willfully. People were kicked off their land. People were murdered. A new system of society was created that supplanted and in many cases explicitly suppressed the society that existed before Western Europeans arrived on this land. We are all well aware of the climate crisis, the climate change that has been caused by humans that is reshaping the world. Many of us know people who were born with congenital health conditions. When I was born, my mum was adopted, and her relationship with her birth mum remains complicated. My dad's family has complicated histories of trauma and abuse. So from the very moment I opened my eyes, admittedly in Aotearoa, New Zealand, not in Australia, on Bunurong land, but the first time I opened my eyes, all of who I was shaped by forms of brokenness. That I was shaped by cycles of family trauma, family abuse, shaped by the injustices that I benefited from in some ways and didn't benefit from in other ways. All of us are sort of just born from, and we grow up in and are shaped by a world that is marked in a whole bunch of different ways by inequity and injustice and evil and sin. So we are all shaped by this. This is sort of just a sort of fairly straightforward observation about the world, that the world is broken in various ways, and that causes us harm, and that's passed on to us, and that shapes who we are. And so who we are as products of the world, of creation, is a product of a world that's in some ways, in many ways, broken. That's the bad news. The good news is that the Christian gospel says that all the brokenness of the world is not the last word about what it means to exist in this world and what it means to be human and what it means to relate to one another. So there are relationships that are broken in my family. And yet broken relationships are not my only experience in this world. I've been married for 10 years and I deeply, deeply love my very beautiful wife. And so for all the brokenness of the world, all the no that says human existence should not flourish, there is a divine yes. The world is pregnant with the possibility of reconciliation, renewal, love, mercy, justice, and hope. So we have to be very clear-eyed about naming the injustice and evil in the world, and we have to be very clear-eyed about speaking words of judgment when the world is broken and hurtful, and when people like women who are victims of domestic and family violence, we have to be honest about hearing the word of judgment that says that is hell, that people live an experience of hell in those situations. And we have to pursue a world that says the hell that people experience, where they suffer the risk of harm and injury and death, we have to seek after a world where that is not the final word that we say about the world. And that is the Christian gospel. So yes, there's all sorts of stuff we need to say about judgment. We need to say a lot about how human beings are shaped by a world that is broken, and that then leads people to hurt other people and to break other people and to break other things, and that humans are driven in all sorts of ever new, creative, and wonderful ways to hurt each other and be capricious and be evil. And we need to name that. And we need to name that truer than all the failures of the world and all the failures of people is the hope that redemption is possible, that transformation is possible, that love, mercy, and justice is possible. And that is often a really hard sell, because the world seems to be going to shit a lot these days. And so it's a really hard sell to sell the gospel. Just as it's a hard sell to sell that crucified, wandering Jewish rabbi was raised from the dead. It's a hard sell. But it's what the gospel is about the hope of a yes that is the final word to all of the places where the world says no. So yeah, I have all the time in the world for judgment. I have all the time in the world for hell. I think we just don't have to wait to get there.